So no movie reviews for me this past weekend. There wasn't any major releases I was all that interested in seeing. Sorry, Insidious fans. But after seeing the box office this past weekend and how the box office has been going lately, I felt like this was a video that needed to be made. Because this summer, when it came to movies and all the anticipation for all the releases, it has so far, as of this moment, been a summer of mostly just straight out box office bombs or disappointments. Specifically that month of June, where just so many varying degrees of just box office duds. You're talking about The Flash, Elemental, Indiana Jones, and I'm also going to throw Fast X into that mix, even though it came out in mid-May. Just movies that just did not meet expectations when it came to making money. Now you may be asking, well, what's the point of movies, making money and whatnot? Who cares? If I just enjoy the movie, I enjoy the movie. Well, enjoying the movie is fine, but the box office is how studios see what movies audiences want to see. And that's why movies making money and being profitable is all that important. Keep in mind that movies have to make at least twice their budget in order to be profitable, when you factor in marketing and other stuff in terms of giving money back to the movie theaters. So you got The Flash, which has made $260 million worldwide against a $220 million budget. Elemental making $250 million against a $200 million budget. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny so far grossing $247 million worldwide against a budget estimating from $250 million to $300 million. And then Fast X, which has made $720 million worldwide against an absolutely ludicrous $340 million budget. So you see going into the summer that there was so much to see when it came to your movie viewing selection. And I haven't mentioned the stuff that has done from, decent to well, like Transformers Rise of the Beast, The Little Mermaid, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Across the Spider-Verse. And there's the stuff yet to come, with this week having Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, and next week bringing audiences the can't-miss double punch of Oppenheimer and Barbie. But you see, that's the thing. In my opinion, there's just way too much to see these days, especially during the summer season. In consecutive weeks, you just had a bombardment of blockbuster type movies, with one coming after the other, after the other, after the other. May 15th brought the audiences Fast X. Then the week after that was The Little Mermaid. Then the week after that was Across the Spider-Verse, getting into the month of June. The week after that was Transformers Rise of the Beast. The week after that was two movies, The Flash and Elemental. And then a couple weeks later, you had Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I think the movie that suffered the most here when it came to its opening weekend box office was definitely Elemental. It was already competing with The Flash on the same opening weekend. But then it was just coming off consecutive weeks of some of those movies I mentioned, like The Little Mermaid, Transformers, some movies like that are going after the same audience. Across the Spider-Verse, obviously, too, another animated film. You see that in the weeks after, though, Elemental has kind of held up well, when it didn't have to go up directly against The Flash and had some room to breathe on its own before Indiana Jones and some other stuff came out. The same kind of phenomenon happened in March, which also had a pretty big bombardment of pretty big movies, like Scream, Creed 3, and John Wick. And you had the Super Mario Brothers movie in the early part of April. But out of all those movies that I mentioned during this part of the year, one that I didn't mention was Shazam! Fury of the Gods. And it ended up being a huge box office bomb for a variety of reasons, but one of them definitely was because there was just so many movies going to see. A lot of these movies just seem to be cannibalizing each other when it comes to so much competition, which is where you see the dollars getting split up and why movies just haven't been meeting their box office expectations. There's also additional mitigating circumstances which explain why some of these movies haven't done as well as they should. You have Fast X, which I'm hesitant to call a bomb, but I definitely think it's a box office disappointment in terms of its domestic box office, only grossing $140 million against, like I said, its $300 million budget. In all honesty, the Fast and Furious movies have been in decline when it comes to domestic box office ever since it peaked with Furious 7. And it goes to show that the longer that this series gets away from Furious 7, which seemed to be kind of like a natural ending for a lot of fans in the series, audiences just keep losing more and more interest to where they gotta have some really big stuff for their supposedly last installment, Fast and Furious Part 11 or whatever, to get audiences back invested. Then you have some of these other movies which you can explain their box office in various ways. Or you have The Flash, which DC has just had a whole bunch of flops recently. with obviously Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which I mentioned a little bit ago. Black Adam was a major disappointment, and the years before they had some various pandemic-related disappointments, with you have the Suicide Squad or Wonder Woman 1984. There's just so much bad vibes around the DC universe, and then there's plus the fact that audiences know that it's getting rebooted. And this film, despite the fact that Warner Brothers tried to hype it up through varying sort of professional or even sort of celebrity reviews saying it was the best film ever, well, people went to go see the movie, and it definitely turned out not to be the best superhero film ever. It's not a bad film or anything like that, but I definitely don't think it's some like must-see event that's gonna like blow your mind or anything like that. Elemental, which I mentioned a little bit ago, you could explain away by the fact that it was going up against a lot of competition, which I mentioned that factor, like I was going directly against The Flash. But you see in the weeks after that, it's actually done respectable business week by week in terms of making up money and seeing that people did actually want to see this movie. I saw the movie, and if you've seen my review, I thought it was pretty good.
See? He likes it!
I think that word of mouth has spread towards other audiences or people wanting to give the movie a chance and seeing it and think like, oh, it's pretty good, and giving it a recommendation to everyone else. As for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, you would think sort of a big legacy franchise like Indiana Jones would be a can't miss sort of thing to put out there and make some money. Well, I do think, though, that they sort of overestimated the popularity when it comes to Indiana Jones in sort of the modern day. You're talking about a lot of kids and all that kind of stuff who's, you know, Indiana Jones isn't a franchise they grew up with.
Get back!
So it's not going to be the type of thing that's a must-see event. Unlike a franchise like Star Wars, which even though through its ups and downs, it's still Star Wars, and people are going to go see it regardless of whatever they put out. Indiana Jones hasn't had that kind of appeal throughout the years, even though it is sort of a big legacy franchise. You couple that with the fact that it's coming off Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which obviously is not a fan favorite amongst many of the major hardcore indie fans out there. And plus the fact that this one got solid reviews, but definitely nothing mind-blowing. I did give it a good recommendation on my review that I published a couple weeks ago. That would explain why it did sort of underperform during its opening weekend, doing 60 million, so far grossing 120 million domestically. That wouldn't be looking so bad right now, as it's still definitely got a few weeks to make some money. But as I mentioned before, it's got that $300 million budget, a pretty ludicrous budget for an Indiana Jones film. Why it needs to be that expensive, I don't know. It's not like Harrison Ford got a $100 million paycheck for this movie. Either way, all of these films, despite those mitigating circumstances, would have stood a much better chance of being successful if those budgets just weren't so goddamn high. $340 million for Fast X, $300 million for Indy, just way too expensive for movies like this. In case people haven't realized just yet, inflation is definitely real. You know, the price for movie tickets is insane, to where you go to pay for an IMAX ticket now or Dolby, and you're going to be paying like $23 or $25, something like that. And you factor in if you have a family going to go out and see a movie, that's spending like over $100 for a movie if you got like a family of 4 or 5 or something like that. You add in buying theater food and things like that, and there's only certain movies that people are going to go see to spend out their hard-earned dollars. Now, there have been some movies this year that have been definite bona fide hits. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 has done very well, even though it had sort of a somewhat softer opening weekend.
You're just making it sad.
Because of its good word of mouth, it got a whole bunch of repeat business. The Little Mermaid has done very respectable business in terms of domestic box office, and it makes sense because it did get pretty good reviews, especially given the standards of Disney live-action remakes. I think Transformers has done respectable, given where the state of the franchise was over the past few years. Definitely the biggest hit so far has been Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which correlates to the fact that it was definitely the best reviewed and highly sort of acclaimed blockbuster so far movie of the summer season. So you can also correlate just making better movies will equate to people going out to go see your movie. Across the Spider-Verse has been universally loved by everyone, and that's why so far it's the biggest film of the year domestically in terms of US audiences. So that's basically what I wanted to go into when it came to this video right here. There was so much anticipation for this summer, and it was just sort of weird to see one flop after another. But that's why I wanted to do this deep dive and see why these films haven't been performing up to expectations. As I mentioned before, yeah, you want to go out and see and enjoy your movies, but in terms of why movies get made, it's made because studios want to make money. If certain movies aren't getting making any money, well, they're going to stop making these movies. And that's why I think the Fast and Furious franchise is on its last legs. And definitely that's why I think you won't see any Indiana Jones films anytime soon, even though this was probably going to be the last one anyway. There are 3 more major releases this summer that I think are going to do big business. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning this week has gotten great reviews so far. I think that's going to be a huge movie. Maybe not as big as Top Gun last year, but I definitely think it's going to be a pretty big financial hit for the studio. And then, as I mentioned before, next week, the double 1-2 punch of Oppenheimer and Barbie. These have been 2 highly anticipated movies for varying different reasons. But I think the combination of the 2, people have been anticipating seeing both of them on the same weekend. I think these are both going to be pretty big hits, especially Barbie. The only thing that'll stop Oppenheimer is the fact that this is a 3-hour-long movie, which I'm definitely not excited for that, but the movie still looks great. So that'll do it for this box office analysis of how the summer has gone so far. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching.